To get started with our preparation, the first thing I've done here is just shelled my onions. I'm using 2 little red onions because they're what I have, but if you have a large white onion or you just have a large red onion, then that would be fine. And I'm using 2 little ones because I don't have any large ones at the moment. So I'm going to firstly chop my onions. And then there's something happening in the background. Over here you can see that what I've put there is some chicken stock, and I've put 650 millilitres of water into the chicken stock, and I've infused it with some of the saffron. So I've put a pinch of saffron in there, and I'm just letting that go along while we're doing the rest of the preparation. If you can't get saffron, because actually it's quite expensive, then you can simply use a little bit of turmeric. And turmeric is much easier to get hold of and also slightly cheaper. So here you can see I've just taken off the heads of the onions, and then I'm going to cut them in half to make sure that they stand on a nice flat base. And with a really sharp vegetable knife, I'm simply going to cut down the lines of the onion. I've kept it all together, and then I'm going to take the base off and get rid of that. So again, I'm going to go down the lines that already exist and then take off the base and get rid of that bit. I'll just do that with all of these. And then you've got your onions done. And if at any point the onion becomes loose in your hand, then simply turn it so that you've got a better grip. And using a really sharp knife is important, because that way you cut through the vegetable really neatly. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of those little bits, and that's our onion all chopped up. Now I'm going to get a pepper. So I'm just going to move my onion and pop that onto my plate over here. I'm going to move on to the pepper, and with the pepper I'm just going to take the head off like that, and then inside you'll see I'm just going to do a slice around like that, just to take out the insides gently, and then you should just be able to take out the middle section like that, and any seeds that are remaining you can just knock those away. You can hear those going out. Okay, and I'll get rid of those little seeds. And then I'm just going to slice this up, so in half, and similarly as I said before, make sure you're on a flat base. So if that doesn't feel secure, then you can always turn it over, down again. And then we want to keep these quite large, so I'm only going to chop them 4 times. If you want to get rid of this section, you can simply slice that out and take it away. So again, I'm going to take these, that's it, about 3 on that one. Depending how big your peppers are, might depend quite how big your slices go. So always keeping your fingers away from the knife. And this one's slightly bigger, so I'm going to make it a bit smaller. We want to make them roughly a similar size so they all cook through at the same time. With these spring onions, what I've done is actually taken the white off, and I'm just going to use the green today, more for the colour. So I'm just going to take off the ends, and then I'm simply going to cut those, keeping them all together, and then these will go in and make a nice kind of green against all the oranges, reds and yellows that we're going to create in the paella. So I'll pop those to one side. Here I've got 4 tomatoes. In the original image I used small plum tomatoes. Here I'm using rather larger ones. Really you could use any tomatoes that you like, and obviously depending what type of tomato you use will depend how many you need. So for this I'm going to use 4 of these kind of medium size, and if I was using the smaller ones then I'd have to use around about 10 to 12 to make up a similar kind of size. So I'm literally going to just take these into quarters like that and keep them nice and large. Pop them to one side. Okay, and then I'm going to do that with all of them so that we end up with these quite nice large pieces of tomato, and they'll look really pretty. If you want to de-seed them, then you can. I'm just going to leave them in. Okay, so all of our preparation is now done. I'm just going to go back over what we've got before we get ready to cooking it all. So we've got our peas ready here, which is just frozen. They're petit pois, but you could use garden peas, whatever you prefer. I've got a tablespoon here of white wine vinegar. You could use a white wine if you have it. I've got 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I've got 1 teaspoon of garlic oil, and the reason I use garlic oil is that I actually prefer that to raw garlic, but if you were going to include garlic in this, then just use 2 cloves of garlic and chop them up, taking off the shells as I've done with the onions. Here we've got chicken stock, which was a gluten-free chicken cube, and literally added to that is 650 millilitres of water and a pinch of saffron. And as I said before, if you don't have saffron, then you could use turmeric to give you that colouring. Here I've got my prawns ready, and these are raw prawns, and you can tell that because they're grey. You could use cooked prawns if you like, that are frozen or that are fresh. Obviously with these, just make sure they cook for a bit longer so that they turn pink, and that's when you know they're cooked. Over here I've got some chopped up chicken, and I've got 200 grams of that. You could also use diced chicken if you like. I've got the pepper, so 1 red pepper, 2 small red onions, the green parts of this just chopped up finely. I've got some thyme in the middle here, and if you don't have fresh thyme, then you could just use dried thyme, that's not a problem. Here are the 4 tomatoes that we chopped up, and then here, instead of chorizo, I'm just using an alternative sausage. And if you can't find chorizo and you'd rather try with a different sausage, then that's absolutely fine. And then finally, you can't see because it's not in the image, is here I've got some paprika, which is obviously a key element. So let's get cooking. Okay, so here I've just rearranged my ingredients so they're nice and easy for me to get as I begin to cook. I'm going to turn on the gas and just have it on a medium heat. I'm going to turn that down, and the first thing I'm going to go in with is the olive oil, and I'm going to try and pour that around the pan to try and get a bit of coverage. This is a non-stick pan that I'm using anyway, but I'm going to put in my olive oil. And then because I'm using garlic oil as well, I'm going to put that in at the same time and try and cover the spaces that I haven't covered yet. And they burn because that can leave quite a nasty taste. All we're going to do is just let the onions soften in the oil. You can begin to see when the oil is heating up because it will start to make a bit of a sound. Okay, so I'm going to put in the onions. Just going to place them in. You can hear straight away as that hits the oil, there's a slight sizzle. It isn't too much, so we know it's not burning. And I'm just going to pop them around. And then I'm just going to separate them out into the pan so that they all begin to get a little bit of the oil. And if you do see them begin to sizzle in places and not in others, then just make sure they're well coated so so that they roughly equally start to cook at the same time. Try to keep them all in the oil if you can. So if you hear them sizzling away, turn your heat down a little bit and just let them carry on. A bit of a tricky one here, won't separate. Okay, there we go. I'm using a plastic spoon here, but I quite often actually cook with wooden spoons. Right, there we go. Nicely separated. Just letting them on a low heat soften. And as they soften, what you'll notice is that the colour starts to change in them, so they won't be quite so vibrant a purpley red colour. They'll start to lose that a little bit. Okay, so you can see that I've just left these for a few moments to let the colour slightly come out of them, and that's changed to a paler colour. And what I'm going to do next is add in the peppers. And give that a little shake around. And then to that I'm going to add a tablespoon of salt and a tablespoon of paprika. And I'm going to try to evenly spread it across the pan so that the oil starts to take up the flavour. And I'm not going to leave that for too long. I'm going to give it a stir because we don't want these onions to burn. As I said earlier, we just want them to soften. So I'm going to move that around a little bit. You can see the oil's changing colour. And it's starting to coat the onions and the peppers. And this next step happens quite quickly. I'm going to add in the chicken. And this is defrosted chicken already. That's 200 grams gone in, chopped up. I've tried to make them roughly the same kind of size, so that again they cook through at a similar rate. And with chicken, obviously, you can tell when it's cooking because it starts to go white and it changes from a pink colour. So I'm just going to coat that with all the colouring. See how quickly this is all starting to change colour, and I've only got this on a rather low heat so that you can see the changes happening. There you go, already you can see the chicken starting to change. I'll try and evenly put that around. So to that I'm going to add my rice, and I'm using paella rice here. If you don't have paella rice, then you could use jasmine rice, or you could use risotto rice. Now obviously with risotto rice the difference is it will start to become very creamy, and it won't have such a separated texture. So if you enjoy that creaminess, then you know, use risotto rice, use what you've got in the house. But for this particularly, I've actually gone out and got paella rice. And today I'm going to be using chicken and prawns because that's what I've got in my freezer. But for your protein, you could choose to use whatever you like, really. A really affordable version of a fish protein is to use fish sticks because they're only around £1 or £1.50 for a whole pack. So if you wanted to use prawns and fish sticks, then that's a affordable way of doing this. But always have a look around and see what works for you. Right, so that's all nicely coated, and I've just left the rice in there for a bit before I add the stock, because what we want is for the rice to become a little bit translucent before we add the stock to it. You see, I haven't added anything else yet. So leaving that light rice just for a little bit, you can see that it's starting to become translucent as it's taking up the oil and the heat of the vegetables and the meat that's in there. And I'm going to add in this stock, which I prepared earlier. I'm going to give it a little stir, just because otherwise, there you go, as I stir it you can see the saffron coming to the top. So just give it a little mix. And this is still warm because I only prepared it as I was doing the rest of the preparation. Okay, so when I'm putting in liquids, I always err on the side of caution, because you can always add more liquid. What you can't do is take it away when you don't want to create a soup. So I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit more now. And make sure that everything's slightly covered. Let that cook away nicely. I'm going to add in my pieces of sausage. And I didn't add these in at the beginning because they've got quite a strong flavour, so I'm just adding them in now. And as you start to see it bubble, so if you bring it up to heat, as you start to see it bubble, you can turn the heat down and just let it simmer. So here you see I've simply been moving the chicken. I haven't moved the rice. I've just turned the chicken over so that each side is getting cooked equally. I'm going to add in the white wine vinegar, and again try to move it around the whole pan so that it has an equal flavour. And now I'm going to put in the tomatoes and the spring onions. I'm going to try and get them into the sauce a bit more. Okay, and the spring onions. And then I'm going to put the prawns in. Prawns obviously don't need as long to cook as chicken does, and that's why I started with the chicken. So whatever protein you're using, have a think about what takes the longest to cook. So what you don't want is really overcooked prawns or undercooked meat. And then I'm going to add in the peas. You see, this is starting to look really nice, all the wonderful colours. And this is a nice and simple one-pot dish to be able to do from home and to feel like you're having a holiday experience. Finally, I'm going to go over with my thyme. I'm just going to take it off and sprinkle it over. See, if you want to use some larger pieces, you can. As I say, if you don't have fresh thyme, then you can always use dried and just use a tablespoon and sprinkle that over as well. Okay, so I'm just tearing those off and sprinkling them on. And with the remainder of the stock that I prepared earlier, I'm going to now slowly put it in to make sure that we're now covering the rest. Okay, and I'm still going to leave just a little bit, so I'm going to see how that goes. If I need a bit more later, I can add it in. Once again, I'm going to turn the heat up slightly, now there's more in the pan. And then wait for that to start to bubble again. And as you start to see it bubble, then we'll turn it back down to simmer and leave it again. So, there we go. 1 or 2 bubbles we've got arriving. What we want to do is make sure that we're cooking not just the centre of the dish, but also the outsides. You can always move your pan around a little bit if you need to. You can even start to see those prawns changing colour already, so you can see that they quite quickly get cooked. And this chicken on the outside here, I'm just seeing that that's a bit pink, so I'm going to actually move that into the centre where the heat is a bit more. So if you find any pieces of chicken that don't seem to have cooked quite as much, you can move them into the centre. Okay, right, so I'm going to once again leave that to simmer again. So now this has been cooking away for a little while. You can see that the prawns have all definitely now become like a pinky colour. We can see the tomatoes are softening. You can see that the oil has slightly changed colour and has risen to the top. So all of this is giving you indications that we're getting towards being cooked. And I've got some lemon cut up over here, which I'm also going to put in. Gives it a nice fresh flavour, and I actually quite like to actually put lemon zest grated on top, but that's a preference, so depending how much you like the lemony flavour, you might not want to do that. All of these things can be adjusted the more that you cook and the more that you experiment with how you like flavours to be. So we can start to see the rice is rising to the top. There isn't that much liquid left. I'm not going to put any more of that stock in because we've had enough to cook through the ingredients. I'm just going to leave it for a few more moments. At this point you could try the rice and just see. Really lovely. Just see how well cooked it is. If it's a little bit grainy, you could cook it for a bit longer. We also want to check on the chicken, so turning them over, seeing how well cooked they are. if you've got a larger piece and you're not sure it has been cooked all the way through, then you could just take it into your spoon and with a knife just cut through and see if that's done. Okay, so that's all white. If it's all white, we know it's cooked. So that's good, and that's one of the larger pieces. Check around the edges. Those bits may not have cooked quite as much. Here we can see the tomatoes are going lovely and soft, so they'll be really nice to eat. But I've not been messing around with this too much. I've not been stirring it. I've literally just let it heat through. And where I've seen that pieces aren't heating through as much, I've just moved the pan to that area so the heat can spread over. Okay, so now that the sauce is reduced, we check to see that the rice is all cooked and that your protein is cooked. I've taken it off the gas and I've just let it sit for a few moments. What we don't want to do is soften all the vegetables too much so that they become mushy. So I've left a bit of a sauce in there so it's not too dry. And then I'm just going to pop it onto my plate with a bit of variety of things on there. There we go. A few prawns. Okay. And then I've just put a little bit of salad on the side here, which I'm going to dress with a little bit of olive oil. Okay. And I've got a little bit of white balsamic dressing. I'll pop that on there as well. And then I'm going to take out one of the lemons, pop that on there. And there you have it. A holiday dish from home.